So I love teaching, love social justice, I love learning, I love reading. And if you put all that together, then what am I going to do? I decided to become a rabbi.
We are here to speak with you as you draw to a close your fully spiritual, creative life as the rabbi of our Sinai Temple, your significant religious leadership in the greater Springfield community, as well as the Reform movement of Judaism. And since one of my greatest privileges and pleasures in life was to be part of the committee that chose to hire you, and then as president of the temple, work with you closely for the first 3 years that you were here, I'm now delighted to be part of this meeting. You and I remember well the ride that I gave you 27 years ago, where I brought you throughout Long Meadow, Springfield, and your first visit into Sinai Temple. It went easily for both of us. You became our rabbi, and our work together began. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As you started, it became apparent there was a need for growth in many areas of the temple life. You worked hard and brought about many changes. How far ahead did you keep thinking?
It's interesting. I'll tell you, I actually, among the things that I did is I made a list after the first 1 or 2 services of the things I thought needed to be changed. And as time went by, I kind of ticked off the list, and I found the list again, which is the good thing. I found the list again. I'm not even sure where it was, but I did find the list. So I guess to some extent, when it came to the specifics, the ritual of services, I wanted to capture when I first came what I liked and didn't like, and I said, well, these are some things that I think need adjusting. So some of them changed. Interestingly, I try to remember now, there were some things that you wouldn't even remember we used to do a certain way, and I thought, oh, right, just the tiniest little thing. But in my handwriting, I have written down, for example, on occasion not wear robes. So I really laugh at that now, because of course we haven't worn robes since about my 3rd or 4th year here. So that change took place. But here's a change I didn't even put down, which I became aware of in the last few days when I thought about it. A change I didn't even record at the time had to do with the organ. Because we used to do all of our services with the organ playing. And the congregation I had come from before didn't have an organ, whereas where I grew up did have an organ. So I remember the first time when we came to services here, Marcia and I kind of liked the organ because it reminded us of where we grew up. But you know, we don't have an organ anymore. And somewhere along the line, I don't remember where or when, I began to think this organ is not working for us. So we would on occasion use the piano, and then I would offer people, would you like to use the piano for a bar bat mitzvah? And more people began to choose the piano, and then we moved the piano into the sanctuary so we didn't have to carry it back and forth. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere the piano just became our main instrument. So I guess some things I thought about initially, but something like that, it didn't even occur to me until we were way down the line that, come to think of it, piano's a better instrument for us. And now we have a cantor who plays
the
guitar and it's a perfect instrument for us. So I guess, what did I plan? That's the most obvious thing I would have been aware of when I arrived.
Yeah.
And
when did you decide to stay with us until your retirement?
I don't think I decided, which is to say there wasn't one momentous moment when I thought, oh my goodness. But life has a way of just unfolding, and we were comfortable, and our family is here, and we have friends here. And I thought to myself, this is very pleasant and very nice and just the right spot. You see, I'd been, when I was at Holy Blossom Temple in Toronto, the service was very, very formal. And I really didn't like services at Holy Blossom, but I loved the people. So I learned then, and I thought that what counts more than anything is if you like the people. And whether or not you're standing, sitting, wearing a kippah or not, what counts more than anything is, do you like the people? And so that is sort of what happened here, I think, that more than should I be in a big city or not, do I like the people? And I like the people. And as I figured what happened, this is a full-time job. I can make any job a full-time job. But this is a full-time job, so I found myself doing things I love to do with people I loved. Why would I go elsewhere?
Nice, good. Was that to our benefit for sure?
I hope so. But you asked about change, so there were lots of other changes have happened, or big events have happened, and I think one of the biggest changes has been the move from formality to informality. 25 years ago, I would have been in a shirt and tie, definitely, for this event. But here I am, and one of the things I think that happened around us, really, is that the world grew less formal, and there came to be less a sense of your place is here and my place is there. So another thing that changed is that we used to conduct all services from the bima, and now if you think about it, Cantor and I conduct most of the service for most Shabbat evenings or mornings on the floor of the sanctuary. And it's an altogether different experience. And that's not something I could have known about in 1988. Right. It's just something that it developed, which I think is par for the course. And I would think even in terms of sermons, I still give sermons, but they're different. And if you were to compare my language in 1990 to the language now and the presentation, it's different. It's a different kind of spoken English. And that happened around us. Yeah. It's amazing.
But having you step down, it's so symbolic, actually, stepping down from the bima to stand right with us, sort of in the congregation. It's so much closer. It's not like a barrier there. So it's a very nice change, actually.
Well, I'm glad. But again, in 1988, the fun part is I never knew about it. If you'd said, what do you anticipate? I would never have anticipated that one, because the world changed around us, and I think we changed with it.
Very nicely so.
Yeah. Nathan?
Well, I'm here to represent the Hebrew school body education here. Mm-hmm. And as a group, we made some questions for you.
Yes, I know you did, Nathan.
Yes. So I'm wondering, well, we're all wondering, what inspired you to become a rabbi? And what does Judaism mean to you?
When I was growing up, my dad was a doctor, and my dad and my mom were very involved in the temple, so Jewish life was always very important to me. But since my dad was a doctor, this is sort of operating assumption that the son of a doctor might become a doctor. At least back in those days, that was a kind of operating assumption. And I always liked, in high school, I liked science, so I did all the things you would have to do to go to medical school. And I remember when I was looking at one of two places to go to college. It was either York University or University of Toronto, because that's where I grew up in Toronto. I was looking at what they called the pre-med program. So the pre-med program had chemistry and physics and math and stuff. And I remember sitting with my father, I don't know if this really happened, but I think I remember sitting with him and saying, I don't want to do this. I want to do history or psychology or other kinds of things like that. And I remember his saying, then you should. So I dropped the sciences and I did the humanities. And then while I was in college, I began to teach Sunday school, and I loved teaching. So I would spend it was Sunday school, so I would sort of spend almost all Sunday preparing to teach. It didn't take all Sunday to prepare to teach, all Saturday rather, to prepare to teach, but I took the time because I loved what I was doing, and I loved areas of social justice, of which there was a lot to be concerned with in those years of 1968 to 72. So I love teaching, love social justice, I love learning, I love reading, and if you put all that together, then what am I going to do? I decided to become a rabbi.
Wow, that's a very cool story. And do you think that having such a supportive father really helped you to become a rabbi?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my parents were behind this 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. My father got more and more interested in Judaism. The more I got into it, the more he got interested. So it was
It's kind of like a domino effect.
Yes, it was very supportive. It was good. Good connection, and it was a good decision.
Nice.
And in retrospect, I would not have made any other decision to do anything else in my life.
Yeah. It's nice to hear.
Yeah.
Well, being a synagogue rabbi encompasses so many areas of concern. You mentioned several of them now: helping the congregants through their life cycle events, the spirituality, finding the meaning to life, keeping the building alive, teaching, and so on. Which aspects were the most satisfying to you and why?
Well, I have two answers for that.
Okay.
Probably the thing that energizes me the most, you already know this, but the thing that energizes me the most is trying to think in a creative way about a new kind of program that we never thought of. So you may remember the last 2 years we had the conductor of the Springfield Symphony come on Saturday mornings. I don't know, I do know. When I looked at the program 2 years ago, the symphony was doing
Bernstein and
Bernstein.
Brahms, maybe? It was Bernstein.
They were doing Bernstein, right. So I knew Bernstein, Jewish composer and what have you, and I thought, oh, we've got to see if we can get the conductor here. And so we did get him here, and he and I had the great dialogue here on the beam on the steps. What a great morning. It was so much fun. So what I find most energizing and exciting is the opportunity to do something unusual, creative, that no one would have thought of. So bringing the conductor here 2 years in a row, I thought that was just fabulous. So that kind of stuff I continually think of those kind of things. They just happen.
It keeps charging you up.
Yeah, I love those kinds of things. But I think the thing that's most satisfying and most long enduring is the connections and the relationships with people. So the programming is energizing and dynamic and keeps me creatively alive. But the thing that's the most important is the connections with people. I got to tell you about this email I got. I read it to the confirmation class. Nathan's in the confirmation class. So you may not remember. You were away, Nathan, last week, I think, when I read it.
You mean yesterday?
No, it was last week. So you were there. Anyway, I'm not sure why this connection arose, but some student connected with me. He's about 33 now. And I remembered him. I'm not sure why he emailed me, but anyway, he emailed me to tell me that all these years later, he just wanted to know that he'd not forgotten what happened at Sinai Temple. And he told me that he remembers having been in my office a lot because he was such a difficult child. I don't remember that at all. I remember that he was fascinating. And I remember that he was smart and sort of challenging. But he remembers that he was in the office because he was in trouble. But then he remembered that once he came to see me and he told me he thought he was maybe going to become a Buddhist. So the next time we met, I had a book for him about Judaism and Buddhism. I didn't remember that. And then he told me that he didn't get confirmed, but that in point of fact, what I did for him is he played trumpet. I had him play at the confirmation service. He played trumpet at the confirmation service. So I can't believe I did that, or I can believe I did that. I don't remember that I did that. But if you had to ask me what would make me proudest and feel just unbelievably fulfilled, is that I did those things for that young man, and he remembers those things. What else could I ask for?
Obviously really touched him if he's remembering.
You've had a huge impact on a lot of people.
Well, but something like that is just like, it was just perfect. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. I've had thank you letters from people over the years, but I haven't had a thank you letter 20 years later like that.
Hearing you say that, my son is 33 years old and kind of left before his confirmation, but he remembers, and to this day remembers that you said to him, our door is always open here.
Oh.
Come back, and he's never forgotten that, and I've always appreciated you for that too.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, on the other side of that question, though, have there been disappointments or challenges that you felt more had to be done? And
I wouldn't use the word disappointments, but I'd say I feel there are things that aren't complete. I don't know that for all the programming and all the talk and everything, that the congregation, that individual congregants are quote unquote more Jewish than they were 20 years ago. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know, for example, back about 10 years ago, I made a big full court press regarding Shabbat observance. And we had materials and I spoke about it and all kinds of stuff. So if we were to do a survey and find out, so what's the difference? Right. Is anybody else lighting Shabbat candles or more conscious and aware of Shabbat than they were 10 years ago? I don't know. My suspicion is maybe not. I don't know. So I can't tell you. I do know one thing, that I'm aware of the fact, we had a process here by which we introduced the tallis at the temple. And I thought it was important that we have a tallis cabinet here and that the tallis be made available. But I also knew, or I also asked myself, and I said it at the time when we discussed it, that although I thought it was important for us to make the tallis available and to make it available, I didn't know that if 10 years from then, if all the tallises were worn and we had to buy more, and we had 200 talisim there on Rosh Hashanah morning, I wasn't altogether sure that that would mean that we were a better congregation. So I'm mindful of the fact that simply getting everybody to wear a tallis, on the one hand, it would have certain virtues. But on the other hand, if everybody wore a tallis, in the long run, what would have been accomplished or what would be accomplished. So I'm of two minds about the whole matter. I'm mindful of the fact that we're building good human beings. But there's this other tug. We want to have good Jews, and Jews have to have some connection to their heritage and their traditions and some observance. And there's a pull and a tug. I'd like to have it all. Better human beings and more talisim and more Shabbat.
That's all.
Yeah,
Good answer.
that's all. That's all.
Rabbi, you've
Hello,
given
Nathan.
many sermons in your career here at Sinai Temple. In your opinion, what was the best sermon you've ever delivered?
Okay, Nathan.
I'm
I
asking
did
the
see this
tough
question in
questions.
advance. I did see this one in advance. You made me go back and look at many sermons. So I have here a list of all the sermons I've given. Not quite. I can't answer the question. I could tell you that I reread a lot of sermons, and when I reread one, it almost brought me to tears. And if I were to ask, you may even know what sermon it would be, but this is not that kind of a setting. It's the sermon I gave after I had brain surgery in 2004.
I remember.
So it makes me choke up now. I hadn't read it in a while. So actually my wife Marcia said, that's the best sermon you ever gave. So that was the sermon. It was called, Did I Tell You I Had Surgery?
You
And
did.
the sermon was about, it was 2004. I don't think you would remember it, Nathan.
No.
No. So I had brain surgery in June. And the sermon began by talking about how much I needed to talk about it. So that's why the sermon was called, Did I Tell You I Had Surgery? So I told the whole congregation, because I needed to tell somebody, and I had these sitting ducks there. So I told the story, and then I told about what being in the hospital, and then in the end I talked about this man who I met in the hallway before I had a CAT scan, and he just talked about how he'd had surgery and it all worked out and I didn't need to be afraid, and he sort of disappeared, and in retrospect, I didn't know if I actually ever met him or who he was, and of course I thought maybe it was Elijah.
I was just about to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was Elijah. And then I guess I talked about, after that I talked about the need for people to be together and whatever else I said. But it was probably the best sermon I ever gave because it was most intimately out of me to everybody there. And
It was a great sermon. I remember it to this day. I remember you talking about being wheeled down the hallway of Mass General Hospital,
Yeah.
and it stuck with me too.
so it was the most powerful sermon I ever gave. There are others I have loved, so I will not rehearse them with you now, but others I've loved. The truth of the matter is they say that most rabbis have 2 or 3 sermons they give, and they give them in different ways, not purposely, but how many messages can one person have? So if you were to look at all my Erev Rosh Hashanah sermons, those are a category of sermons I love the most. And the theme in all of them is, again and again, we are finite and fragile and needy, and we deserve to be loved simply for who we are. So that's the sermon that's given again and again. And the relation, the next part of it is, if it's not that sermon on Erev Rosh Hashanah, that it's a sermon about the beauty of life, and that life is beautiful. So my favorite one with that is, it was after seeing Julia and Julia, the movie Julia and Julia,
Right.
where Meryl Streep plays Julia Child, and she's in Paris, and she learns to speak a limited amount of French, but she learns how to say enchanté. Everything is enchanted. And so my message there was we ought to approach life as if life itself was an enchanting opportunity. And I'll say just one more thing. Fran Schechter, one of our temple members, once told me that we were talking about the way in which people greet each other, maybe in the same sermon, and talking about having an open, warm face. And Fran said, what you're looking for in the Yiddish is a lichtige punim. She said, what you're talking about is that someone ought to have a radiant face. So I think the sermons that I love the most are the ones that encourage people to look at life with eyes wide open, and to look at life with radiance, and then also sermons which say we need to love ourselves and take good care of ourselves because we're lovable.
You know, you've given so many sermons in 27 years. It's probably in the thousands, it's certainly hundreds. Given that you have to be it weekly and during the high holidays, there must be a half a dozen that you give in a span of 10 days. What do you look for, or from where do you get your ideas to give so many sermons?
For weekly sermons, though many rabbis write early, it's become my custom not to write till Friday.
Oh.
Because I'm always concerned that something is going to happen or something does happen, and people who arrive at services on Friday or a Saturday morning have had a week. And if something major has happened on Thursday or Friday, then I'm not CNN, and I'm not trying to be CNN. Nobody needs me to be CNN. But I'd like to take into consideration what has happened in the week, where I am and where I think most people will be. So on a weekly basis, I'm working close to I call it frantic Fridays. Some Fridays are frantic, but if I'm trying to do something that's right on the money, then I want it to be right on the money. One of my favorite recent sermons was called, I had to check the name because they get names though no one sees them, I think it was called Helen Mirren and Heroin. For the 2016 Super Bowl, Helen Mirren did this fabulous ad in which she said, you may have seen it, she said, anyone who drinks and drives is an idiot. If you drink and drive, you're a moron. It was a fabulous ad. So I did write a sermon right away. I wrote a sermon for the next Friday night about that. And it was about, because we were at the time, still are in the midst of an opiate crisis and a heroin crisis. Sure. So the sermon was about why would it be that those of us who aren't idiots would still, not me, or us in this room, how would we become addicted, and what's it about us that leads us to addiction and all that? So that's a good example of a sermon. I knew that was a great thing that many people would have seen, and I also knew that we have a great crisis, so I wanted to try and put the two together. So that's the best example of a sermon I loved that came right out of current events and where we are. Sometimes I read a book and I just think I should respond to the book because the book's being read by a lot of people. And the Julia movie, I saw the Julia movie, the Enchanté, and the movie moved me so much that I just carried it forth, and I knew it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. I knew it.
Yeah. Now, I know sometimes over the years you've talked on topics that are pretty controversial. In fact, I remember you one time saying, prefacing your remarks, saying, I hope that people aren't going to walk out during my sermon. But how do you decide? Because sometimes these things are sensitive matters. And how do you decide when something is important enough to you that you want to address it, even though you know there may be different opinions your congregation is going to feel about it?
I guess if it's important enough to me, I decide I'm going to do it. I know that people, again, I'm not CNN, so people aren't coming here to hear me pontificate about the news. I'm mindful of that, and especially, in these last 25 years, things have really changed. I'm not the only one with access to the New York Times every day, or what have you. We all have access to more news than we could ever want, so I have to be really careful. I don't bring news to people. But I guess if I think the issue is important to me, if I think it has some moral dimension to it, then I feel compelled to say something. And it's the most clear example for me is I think it was, I'm forgetting which war was it now? The Iraqi war, that President Bush launched. I am pleased to say that I spoke against it several times before he went to war. And I did hear some negative comments about it, but that was one of those areas where I didn't have any more news than someone who was reading the Wall Street Journal, but what I did read and what I did believe convinced me it was a mistake before. So I did speak about it. And sometimes when I did those things, I could feel my heart beating.
I'll bet.
Sure.
I do feel my heart beating if I know I'm treading on thin ice and I'm going to have people angry, then I try and set it in such a way that it's understanding. But if it's a position, it's a position. That's the one that strikes me as the most out there I was. But there may be others, I just don't remember them.
Well, one of the things you did in recent years was certainly within this realm of could be controversial or not. You did a survey of how our congregants view God, and it reached national attention, which was good. What was your impetus for doing this survey, and then how did you view the results?
Well, I've always talked about faith and lack of faith. So again, looking over things and preparing for our conversation, I looked back in, where was it? I think as early as 1991, I put something together called the Cynic Society. And I said, on given Friday nights, we would talk about reasons for believing or reasons for not believing in God. I think it was 1991, so that's pretty early on.
That was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago. We did about 3 or 4 of those nights, and then all through the years I've raised these issues, always issues of faith. And I suppose it was at some ritual committee meeting, however many years ago, that again, it just happened. I thought, what if we do a survey? And then once I thought about what if we do a survey about God, and what if we do it at the high holidays? And I love things that people don't expect, that they've never heard, and that's how it all came about, because I just thought, this is too exciting not to do, to ask people and to find out what they think. And the results were fabulously interesting. And it was nice. We did publish it in Reform Judaism magazine, which was just a nice honor and a treat, and that was fun. But the most fun was to do it here and raise that issue up. And I think what I was after more than anything was to say to the congregation implicitly, if you have questions about God, you're in the right place, and you ought to be asking questions about God. In case you haven't, you should be. So I loved doing that.
Were you surprised at the results in any way, though? Or?
Not so much. I think the results kind of indicated what I might have thought, that most people, if I can recall now, that most people probably didn't believe in the classic God who's ruler of the universe, and most people had a broader sense of God as a presence. In a nutshell, that's what I remember as being the response. And there were other fabulously interesting details, but I'm not so surprised that those were the responses. I'll tell you one thing I think about, and that is that I've spoken about God a lot on the high holidays. Kol Nidre, I used to speak a lot about God. And I would I would talk like that about God. So I did sort of wonder, I wonder if the congregation thinks this because I was saying this and people actually learned something from me, or if it's out there anyway in the ether and that's what people believe anyway. It doesn't really matter. I've said it and people came back. I loved doing that, survey. We did one on Israel too, which wasn't as exciting, but it was wonderful also.
So, Rabbi, if you ever had the chance to relive one moment in your life without changing it, what would you relive?
Well, I saw this one in advance too, because yours were the hardest questions. Nathan, these came from the confirmation class as a whole.
Yeah.
So I thought about them. So I have a list of events I would relive and love to redo, and I wouldn't change a thing. The night Marcia and I got engaged, May 8th, 1972. I'd do it again, just the way we did it. Our wedding, August 26th, 1972. I would do it again, just the way we did. Another event, it's a whole bunch of years later, maybe 8 or 9 years later, Marcia and I were traveling from Toronto, where we lived at the time, to visit friends in New Jersey. We stopped in Lake Placid, and we rented a boat, and it was a sunny day, and we spent the afternoon on Lake Placid. I would never redo that day again. We might have been out there for 20 minutes or 2 hours. It was just a perfect day. I would never redo that. And other days, you got me thinking, wait, I got more here. I got 2 others. Saturday mornings at Tanglewood at the rehearsal. We've done that many times, and I would never redo any of those because they're perfect. And 2 events at Sinai. A year and a half ago, we did that first Erev Rosh Hashanah visual service. It was all visual, all on the bima. I would never redo that service. It was just extraordinary. It was just
You would never change it.
perfect.
Yeah.
It was just perfect. And I think I would never want to relive, I would never change the final service at Sinai this Yom Kippur. It was my last Ne'ilah service. And in the last Ne'ilah service, we brought everyone towards the front and everyone up on the bima. And I thought I was going to cry because, here's a secret, ever since my surgery, whenever we get to Ne'ilah, I find myself choking up when we get to Ne'ilah. It happened in 2004, and every other Ne'ilah, I sort of got a lump in my throat. But I didn't this time. That service was the new prayer book had been so successful and so perfect, and everything had fallen in place so well that I felt as if I don't surf, but I felt as if I was surfing, or I was bike riding on a beautiful sunny day, and it was just crescendoing and crescendoing. We couldn't have ended that service more beautifully, more powerfully, more ecstatically, more exuberantly than what happened on Yom Kippur right here this past fall. I'd never want to redo that again. It was perfection.
And what a nice way to start a new year.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Secret, I thought about it a day later. I don't know, I went for a bike ride a day later, and then as soon as I got home, I had a great bike ride. I wrote up my feelings about that Ne'ilah, and I sent them to myself, or I put them, I think, in our safety deposit box to be opened in 10 years.
Oh.
So I wrote myself a letter about how you felt the day after Yom Kippur. And I still have it. If you ask me about it, I got it in an instant. It was a great, grand moment.
Nice. Speaking of secrets, I wanted to ask you about bar and bat mitzvahs. That you, at the end of every service I've seen you do, you traditionally come down to the bottom of the stairs with a young man or woman.
Yeah.
I saw you do this with Nathan about a year ago. And you place your hands on the young man or woman's shoulders, and you impart some wisdom in a very soft voice that no one else can hear. So I don't want you to give away any secrets, but I would like to know, what is it that you're trying to impart at that moment? What are you telling these young men and women? What do you want them to take away from this such important moment?
Well, usually I hope that before I do that, I've spoken to them from the bima, and I hope I've found some hook or some connection, and what I've said is uniquely personal to them. I've talked to them about something that was uniquely them. And so, to be honest, when I go down the stairs, I reprise more or less some aspect of what I said to them. And very often, the young person has been extremely nervous before we all began. Not always, but most often The child's been really, really unique. So it's a nice chance to say, because almost always they've done very well, it's a wonderful chance to say, you did really well, and I hope, how do you feel? And then I kind of pick up on something that I've already said and repeat that because it's unique to that child. It's nobody else's.
Yeah.
So I never say the same thing to any child publicly or any child privately. It's always just their moment.
The only thing I remember from that moment was, I don't remember what you said, but I remember it had it was personal and touching, I guess.
That's all it had to be, Nathan.
Yeah, really don't remember what you said.
So Nathan, when I got ordained, the president of Hebrew Union College, the rabbinic school, calls you up and calls you in front of the ark. There's the ark of the sanctuary where it happened. And here's the thing. He says something to you. I have no recollection as to what he said. This is a pretty important point in my life. I'm being ordained as a rabbi. He might say the same thing to everybody. I don't know if he does. I have no recollection as to what he said, but I remember that moment. Actually, one other moment that I would never redo was my ordination. That Saturday morning of service was a moment unlike anything I anticipated. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment.
Tell me about who were the most interesting people or situations you've dealt with?
Well, there are so many. I'll tell you about just two. I mean, I could tell you about five, but I don't think we have time for five. Here's one. I can name the person, Ruth Amson. Ruth Amson was a member of our temple when I first came. She's been gone for about 10 years or so. She was from Germany. She came, I guess, before the Holocaust. She wasn't in any concentration camp. She came before the Holocaust. Always had a German accent, was very Germanic, very formal. She used to come to services regularly. And then as time went by, she became more ill. And finally, she ended up in the nursing home. And I used to visit her. And then she lost the ability to speak. She was really, really fading. So one day I went to visit her. And I don't know why, but I brought with a recording of Beethoven's Sixth. I don't know why. And I said to her, Ruth, let's listen to the music. And Ruth, who was sort of in a bit of a fog at best, as the music began, of course it was the right symphony to bring for her. As the music began, she sort of leaned back and had a smile on her face, and she began to conduct. And we listened to I think we listened to the whole first movement. Or maybe it was the last movement, whatever it was, I said, I think it's about to start. She didn't speak. I'm sorry, I said, I think it's building to the climax right now. And she went, she knew exactly, because Beethoven goes again and again. She knew exactly. I was about 32 measures early. She said, no, with her hand. And then it proceeded to end. So she couldn't say a word to me and had no other word to say to me, but we had Beethoven between us. And I knew when I came, I knew it would be her music. I knew it would be right. And so that is just this golden moment with her. And then I'll tell you about another one. I don't remember who this was, but I hope it's okay to tell you this because I don't remember who it was. It was one of those services we have where we celebrate wedding anniversaries. So I know that when we do that we run a risk, because here we are celebrating wedding anniversaries, and there are people who maybe were never married, or who are divorcing, or who've lost a spouse. So here we are celebrating weddings, and we're skating on thin ice if we're not careful. But on the other hand, if we don't celebrate wedding anniversaries, it's not fair to the people who have the joy. So it's kind of a balancing act. Anyway, one year we did that, and somebody in the congregation, an older woman, came up to me and said it was a beautiful service, and she said, did you see my brooch? And I said, it's beautiful. And she said, well, I wore it today because my husband, who's no longer alive, gave it to me. And I knew that I was going to come to the service tonight when you would be celebrating weddings. But I thought to myself, even if I can't stand up there, I can bring my memory with, and in a way I can bring him with. So I wanted you to know. Oh, now I'm tearing up.
It's quite a story.
I wanted you to know that this was a beautiful service for me, and in a way, the memory of who he was and what we had together was with me, and thank you for the service.
Very nice.
So I would say that was a great moment. There are other moments as well, but without naming 1,000 of them, those are two that for whatever reason come to mind. Lots of others.
Times like that when you say, aren't I glad I became a rabbi?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was there at the moment to frame that and to let that happen. Yeah.
Okay. What was your favorite Purim spiel that you've ever performed?
Well timed. Perfect timing, Nathan.
Because there's been a wide variety in the past
Oh,
couple of years,
Nathan,
from
I look
Pirates
back.
to Frozen.
Yes, we've done Frozen, we did Harry Potter, we did Aladdin,
Pirates.
we did Hook, the movie Hook. We've done Music Man, Fiddler on the Roof. So,
Yep.
okay. The one that immediately came to mind was one with Cantor Meckler, Emily Meckler, and me. We were doing Fiddler on the Roof, and we were preparing something baked for the banquet. I was Haman, she was Esther. We were preparing for the banquet, which we were going to have with the king. So we each were supposed to prepare whatever. And we were on the bima, and we had flour up there, and we knew what we were going to do. So it was there was a song, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So that was the song we were singing, and a little bit of this, and I threw flour on her. And a little bit of that, she threw the flour back at me, and we had a flour fight on the bima, which we had planned, but we really went to town having that flour fight. Till we couldn't sing and we couldn't stand. We were laughing so much. That is a Purim that comes to mind. And there's one more that comes to mind. Well, many come to mind. Two more. One when Jed Filler was the educator. We did Annie. And we all wore the Annie dress, that little red dress. I had to talk Jed, who was a large guy, into wearing an Annie dress. So the three of us, Emily, Jed, and I, wore the Annie dress. It was just like unbelievably fun. And the other one I remember, I don't know what our theme was, whether we were playing off Frozen or whatever. It was before Frozen. But the theme was basketball, and the final
Space
contest
Jam.
was who could shoot hoops. So Esther got to shoot. There was a shootout. Esther got to shoot, and she had to go like this, and the hoop was right there. And then Sheila Shear was the judge and said, okay, Haman, you have to shoot. And she sent me like 15 feet back in the sanctuary. It couldn't have been Sheila. It was earlier than that, because it was way, 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 way back till I was standing beside Daniel. And Daniel was about 9, because I remember he was a little kid. And so there I am. I'm the worst basketball player in history. And we've got this thing, it's at least 30 feet away. The basket's at least 30 feet away. And I've got a little basketball like this. And I am back there, and I've got to try and shoot it. And the whole congregation is going, boo, he can't get it. And Haman's done if he can't get the basket. So I stand beside Daniel. I lean over. He whispers words of encouragement to me. And I shoot. I got the basket. That was the most amazing. For me to get that basket, for anyone to get that basket from 30 feet was impossible. I got the basket.
Divine intervention.
I know. That is Purim. I love Purim. And this last year, we had a great time with the confetti cannon. That was great.
Well, you're still relatively young and in good health with a lifetime of knowledge and experience. What do you think you're going to do now in your next phase of life?
Well, we're staying here in town, and I think my first area of interest is Tikkun Olam, is further activities in the area of social justice. So what I want to do, and I have some plans for this, is to do volunteer work in the area of Tikkun Olam, but I don't want to stuff envelopes or something. I want to do something that I think has substance and merit and is big for whatever that is. So I have some plans. I don't want to say anything yet. And if one thing leads to another, I have like a number of projects I'd like to work on. And then I'll kind of wait and see what else might unfold. Because life has a way of developing, one thing leads to another. And you don't know
Absolutely.
what opportunities might occasion themselves.
Well, I know so many of us were happy to hear that, regardless of your plans, that you were staying in Long Meadow. Yeah, that's great.
You got
That's
us.
the good news, yes.
So I have the last question, Rabbi, and that is, what do you think you're going to miss most about being our long-term rabbi at Sinai Temple?
The people. I will miss some other things. I went to a meeting last week. It was about needle exchange and whether a needle exchange that exists in Holyoke that may be closed. I went to the meeting. There was a presentation, a fabulous presentation. I'm thinking to myself, of course, I've been doing this for so many years. This would be a great presentation. I want to bring this person to Sinai, and I want to see if we can't get Sinai interested in this very significant issue. And then I thought to myself, no, you're not doing that. You can maybe tell the Social Action Committee, I heard this, which I did, I heard this presentation, but I'm not going to be the one to figure out all the excitement of when we could do it, how we would do it, and all that. So I will miss the opportunity to see a movie or to read a book or to think of something and say, wow, that would really be interesting to use for Torah study or for a program or bring that film to Sinai. I love that kind of thing. And I will not be doing that in the same way, at least. I won't be doing that anymore. And I am so used to doing it. It's so much a part of who I am. It'll be strange to imagine not doing that. But when push comes to shove, the thing that's the most important is I'll miss the people and the connections and just being the rabbi and having this wonderful opportunity to have a window onto so many families and to become a part of life in so many strategic, important ways. I mean, what a great blessing to have been able to do that.
Well, and you will be missed, Rabbi, needless to say. So we just want to close by thanking you, certainly all three of us, and really for everybody who's going to get a chance to see this, for taking the time to sit down and do this conversation with us. I think it was incredibly interesting and informative, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do it. This video that we're making, of course, will be preserved just so that to preserve our conversation, but also it preserves so much history, important history of Sinai Temple that you were involved with over 27 years. So in addition to saying thank you, and to say congratulations on a remarkable run that you've had here, and to thank you for providing such steadfast, caring, and capable guidance to us for such a long time. So thank you, Rabbi, and we certainly wish you all the best.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.